Good morning.
Morning.
Hope everybody's having a good morning so far. So I'm going to start off the class by saying I'm not the most talkative person in the world. So I can't, right? And in my past 32 years on this earth, I can't recall a time where I stood somewhere and spoke for more than 40 minutes at one given time. And I don't plan on making today my first time. So all the comments and questions would be appreciated. So we're doing a study on the book Wake Up Deacons. I can't say that I went strictly from the book on this. I kind of got the idea from the book, and then I kind of went off on my own little tangent. But I did get the idea, and the idea is your attitude is showing. So attitudes... Oh, aim it down? Yeah. I'm short, right? There we go. All right. Now. Okay, yeah, 2 minutes. Right? All right. But attitudes pretty much encompass everything. From every lesson I've heard so far in this study, attitudes have been mentioned. So I'd like to start with a story. It's a little lengthy story, but I think it kind of proves my point. So we'll begin. Jerry's a manager of a restaurant in America. He's always in a good mood and always has something positive to say. When somebody asked him how he was doing, he would always reply, "If I were any better, I'd be twins." Many of the waiters at his restaurant quit their jobs when he changed jobs so they could follow him around from restaurant to restaurant. The reason the waiters followed Jerry was because of his attitude. He was a natural motivator. If an employee was having a bad day, Jerry was always there telling the employees how to look on the positive side of the situation. Seeing this style really made me curious, so one day I went up to Jerry and asked, "I don't get it. No one can be a positive person all the time. How do you do it?" Jerry replied, "Each morning I wake up and say to myself, I have two choices today. I can choose to be in a good mood or I can choose to be in a bad mood. I always choose to be in a good mood. Each time something bad happens to me, I can choose to be a victim or I can choose to learn from it. I always choose to learn from it. Every time someone comes to me complaining, I can choose to accept their complaining or I can point out the positive side of life. I always choose the positive side of life." "But it's not always that easy," I protested. "Yes, it is," Jerry said. "Life's all about choices. When you cut away all the junk, every situation is a choice. You choose how to react to a situation. You choose how people will affect your mood. You choose to be in a good mood or a bad mood. It is your choice how you live your life." Several years later, I heard that Jerry accidentally did something you're never supposed to do in a restaurant business. Left the back door of his restaurant open. One morning, he was robbed by 3 armed men. While trying to open the safe, his hands shaking from nervousness slipped off the combination. The robbers panicked and shot him. Luckily, Jerry was found quickly and rushed to the hospital. After 18 hours of surgery and a week of intensive care, Jerry was released from the hospital with fragments of bullets still in his body. I saw Jerry about 6 months after the accident. When I asked him how he was, he replied, "If I were any better, I'd be twins." Want to see my scars? I declined to see his wounds, but did ask him what had gone through his mind as the robbery took place. "The first thing that went through my mind was I should have locked the back door," Jerry replied. "Then after they shot me, as I lay on the floor, I remembered that I had 2 choices. I could choose to live or I could choose to die. I chose to live. Weren't you scared?" I asked. Jerry continued, "The paramedics were great. They kept telling me I was going to be fine, but when they wheeled me into the emergency room and I saw the expression on the faces of the doctors and nurses, I got really scared. In their eyes, I read, 'He's a dead man.' I knew I needed to take action. What do you do?" I asked. "Well, there was a big nurse shouting questions at me," and Jerry said. "She asked if I was allergic to anything. Yes," I replied. The doctors and nurses stopped working as they waited for me to reply. I took a deep breath and yelled, "Bullets!" Over their laughter, I told them, "I choose to live. Please operate on me as if I am living, not dead." Jerry lived thankfully to the skilled doctors, but also because of the amazing attitude. I learned from him that every day you have the choice to either enjoy your life or to hate it. The only thing that is truly yours that no one can control to take from you is your attitude. So if you can take care of that, everything else in life will become much easier. Amen. So here we see that the only thing that we control, one of the things that we control that no one else can control is our attitudes. Even though sometimes we let people affect our attitudes and we let people choose the way we're going to act sometimes. But in every church, we need the local congregation to have the right kind of attitudes to get things done. Now, the definition of an attitude is a set way of thinking or feeling about someone or something. And in this lesson I've prepared, I've got 4 areas in which we can kind of help our attitudes. But all the talent in the world can't make up for a wrong attitude. It doesn't matter how much money we have here. It doesn't matter how much of anything we have here. If the attitude here isn't right, then nothing's going to go right. So the 4 areas I have is our attitude towards God, our attitude towards ourselves as individuals, our attitude towards our brethren, and our attitudes towards the work in the church. All right, and we're going to start with our attitudes towards God. So the first thing I have here is love. If you want to turn to Matthew chapter 22 and verse 37, there'll be a lot of Bible reading too. Here we read, it says, Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." Do we really love the Lord with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind? If not, we need to take a closer look at the love that we have. Because without loving God, we can't love ourselves, we can't love man. God is everything. The next thing I have here is the faith and trust. Faith is a strong conviction and the trust in things one does not see. We can't see oxygen, we don't see gravity, but we know it's there. In Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." And also, without faith, we can't please God. Hebrews 11 verse 6. "But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him." And then Romans 10:17, the way we get our faith is by hearing. "So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God." So we have love, we have faith and trust. And then the last one I have here is thankfulness. Every Christian should have an attitude of gratitude. Everything that we have is through God. Our jobs, our families, all our material blessings, all our spiritual blessings, we have through him. Colossians 3 and verse 17. "And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." And also in Ephesians 5 verse 20. "Giving thanks always for all things to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." If we can't be thankful for what we have, then what can we be? I have an example here of someone who I think had a great attitude towards God, just because of the situation he was in. If everyone would like to turn to Job chapter 1, I'll be reading verses 13 through 22. And it reads, "Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And a message came to Job and said, The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabaeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they were killed, the servant with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, The Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels, and took them away, yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. And that's a lot. He lost everything that he had. I can only imagine if that happened to me. Would I be able to have the right attitude, or would I turn my back on God? We can't. Go ahead.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because he just lost everything. That's how we would see it. But in Job's attitude, as we're talking about here, he wasn't thinking solely about what he lost. He was thinking about what God had given him. And I think that's the biggest challenge for me. Whenever you're going a hard time or you're challenged with something, it hadn't always been like this, and God's been good to me this time and that time. And I think we just tend to get lost in the sea of despair when we're suffering. But that seems to be the whole trick, is this attitude, when you're going through a tough time. Paul said the same thing in Philippians 4 when he said, Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your request. When you think about, don't be anxious for anything, he seems to be considering the idea that you're praying because you need something, or you're worried about something, or you have great need for something in your life. But as you're praying for whatever that is, don't forget to thank God for what you already have, and for where he's already brought you. And I think that's the thing that we have to be reminded of over and over again, is don't get lost in the moment of heartache or setback or whatever. Just keep remembering that God has done good things for us.
Yeah. And most of the time we may be in a bad situation, but we can't see past that bad situation. God may have something planned for us on the other side of that situation that is going to be better for us, but we just can't see it right then. We have to remember that too. We need to thank him for the situation that we are in.
Closing one door to open another.
That's right. If our relationship towards God is right, and all these other relationships and attitudes we should have no problem with. Proverbs 16 and verse 7 says, When a man's way pleases the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. So if we can be at peace with the Lord, then even our enemies won't have anything to say about us, or we can have a great attitude towards our enemies. All right, the next attitude, we have attitude towards God. We have love, faith, and trust, and thankfulness. Next, we'll move on to attitudes towards ourselves. The first attitude I have here is humility. A humble esteem of oneself is very important. Romans 12 and verse 13 I'll be reading. I'm going to be reading a couple of verses here in a row. Romans 12 and verse 3. For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. And then further on down in the chapter, verse 16. Be of the same mind towards one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinions. And then finally, I'm going to read Philippians 2, verses 1 through 4. So if there is any encouragement in Christ and comfort for love, any participation in the Spirit, any affliction and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing for rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you look not only on his own interests, but also to the interests of others. That pretty much says everything I need to say right there. You put God first, you put others second, and you put yourself third. Now Ruger, he's learned this thing down in Bible class. It's called joy, and it's what I've just said. Jesus first, others second, yourself third. And if you do those three things, then you'll have joy in your life and you'll have the right attitude. Right. I think that's kind of funny because he always runs up to me and he says, "Hey, Dad, spell joy." And I'll spell it for him and he'll say that. And I think it's just the cutest thing. So anyway.
I'm glad it's working.
Yeah, it's definitely working down there. They're definitely doing the right thing. And if he can have the right attitude about it, we should have no problem having the right attitude about that. Humility includes a willingness to serve, even to do the menial task. I'll read a short scripture here. It's John 13, verses 6 through 7. Or 6 through 17, or 7 through 17. Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "He who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you." For he knew that who would betray him. Therefore he said, "You are not all clean." So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You can call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for I am so. For so am I. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, a servant is no greater than his master, nor he who is sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." Jesus here washes Peter's feet. Now, if we're going to think of a lowly task, I mean, washing somebody's feet, that's kind of nasty. Because, I mean, they didn't have paved concrete roads and all these nice little walkways, and imagine they didn't have green grass to walk in. It's all dirt and nastiness. So their feet are disgusting, and he's washing their feet. Yes, ma'am.
I look at like how I want somebody to treat me, how I want somebody to treat my mother or my child, and then you think about it. Because it grieves me a lot now, because I see these things on TV, people have to, how would you tell something, you see something, say something. How would you want somebody to treat you? And I make sure not to treat somebody else. That's the thing I think about. Don't treat somebody else bad, you don't want to treat you bad.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Like that.
That's correct. I always say you give the same respect to the janitor as you do the CEO. So it doesn't matter what position they're in or anything like that. You treat everybody with the same respect. Here I've got a quote from Lawrence D. Bell. It says, "Show me a man who cannot bother to do the little things, and I'll show you a man who cannot be trusted to do the big things." I think that pretty much speaks for itself. If you can't be trusted to do something small, or you think something like that is too low for you and you're not worthy of that, then you can't be trusted to do the big things. The second thing we have here, teachability. To be teachable is to be wise. In Proverbs chapter 15, I'll be reading verse 31 and 32. "The ear that hears the rebuke of life will abide among the wise. He who disdains instructions despises his own soul, but he who heeds rebuke gets understanding." We're never too old to be taught anything. So I mean, some people may say, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, of course you can. You have to be willing to be taught. It's an attitude. If you have the attitude that you're too old to learn anything, or I can't learn anything from him, he's a young guy, he's not going to teach me anything. Well, we can know things that maybe we got another way of doing it. Go ahead.
If you're like me, what it takes, I learned in dog years, I always say that. What it takes somebody 1 year, takes me 7 to grasp it.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned in dog years. I learned it in dog years.
Yeah. Well, see, you're still teachable, though. You have the attitude of a teachable person. It's those people that are like, I'm set in my ways, you know. So, teachability includes an eagerness to learn and grow, and the ability to learn from corrections to profit from advice and criticism. There's this thing, you know, at work, it's called constructive criticism. And you got to be able to take it. Some people can't, so they have to go other places. But when I was in the military, they said you had to have thick skin, because if you didn't, you weren't going to last. So, you know, sometimes we have to take the criticism that we get, and we have to learn from it. We have to be willing to learn from others. So how teachable are we? The next attitude towards ourselves is honesty towards our mistakes. This is a big one. This one's hard for pretty much most of us. We don't like to mess up, and we don't like to admit when we mess up, but we all mess up. In James chapter 5 and verse 16, it says, "Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another, that you may be healed. The affectionate prayer of a righteous man availeth much." No one in here is perfect. There's only one perfect person that ever walked on this earth, and that was Jesus. We can strive to be like him, but we're never going to reach that. But the good thing that we do have is we know that we should be able to go to our brothers and sisters here, you know, and tell them, hey, you know, I messed up, you know, and I need your prayers. We should be able to do that. We should have the attitude, you know, when we mess up, we should be able to tell people. And we should have them have the right attitude back towards us and we'll get to that later, to forgive us. So, we have the attitude towards God, love, faith, trust, thankfulness, and our attitude towards ourselves is humility, teachability, and honesty towards our mistakes. And the next attitude is a big one, because it's hard, because it's the attitude towards our brethren. And it's the same as towards God. We should love our brethren. John chapter 13 and verse 34 through 35. Jesus speaking here. "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. But this all people will know, that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." If we can't love one another, it's going to be hard for people looking in to tell that we're Christians. People on the outside will look at us, but well, they don't like each other. Why do I want to go there? They're always talking about each other behind their backs and always gossiping, and that's not love. None of that's love. So if we can't love one another, then our attitude is wrong. If we truly love one another, how can we not work together to have the right attitudes? The next attitude towards our brethren is cooperation. This involves a willingness to work together as God intended. And we've got 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 21. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker and indispensable. Yeah, I started the right spot. 12 through 21. I started at the wrong spot. Let me start over. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body through many are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink of one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be its sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be its sense of smelling? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the hand to the feet, I have no need of you. Our bodies work together. We need every part of our body to function. Without one part, it makes something hard. Could you imagine tying your shoes without your thumbs, or trying to button a button or do anything? Our thumbs are pretty important, and we need those, and we need them to work together to accomplish what we're trying to do. I have another quote here. So it makes a big step in a man's development when he comes to realize that other men can be called on to help him to do a better job than he could do alone. Now, last week, Robert had an example, and I'm going to use it because I thought it was pretty good, of a horse. You know, one horse pulling a plow can't do as good a job as two horses pulling the same plow. They can do more work. There he is. He's popped his head in the door when he heard his name. Anyway, but I know I have a hard time with this because I like to do things by myself. You know, I don't like to ask for help. But we have to learn to do that. That's why we have each and everybody here, is to help. You know, if we try to do something alone and we need 2 or 3 people, it makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot less stressful on us.
You know, some people want to help, but they won't unless you ask. And you know, some people it just takes that motivation. You ask, it might motivate them to go ahead and do it. You know, in other words, they might not do it any other time unless they just ask. All you gotta do is ask, or they might not be motivated on themselves to do anything, and it just takes that one person to go ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm not willing to ask, and then we got somebody over here willing to help, but they need to be asked, then we have to have the right attitude towards the cooperation, the working together. Nobody in here can do can do it alone. We all need to work together, like Robert's lesson last week on we need to work as a team, work together. And next we have appreciation for others and their work. We definitely need to appreciate what others do. Let's see here. 1 Thessalonians 5, I have 12 and 13. And we urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves. We need to say thank you. If somebody does something, we need to thank them for it. I don't really like to be thanked for things sometimes. I just do it and go on about it. But you know, every now and then a good thank you, you know, it helps lift you up. It edifies you. You know, and then some people may do something and you just don't think to say thank you, but it really affects their attitude. Like, well, I did all this work and no one thanked me for it. And so we need to try our best that when, you know, somebody does something, I mean, we have the holiday dinners, we have all these dinners, you know, even for VBS and the Bible Bowl, you know, it takes a lot of work to do those things. And a lot of behind the scenes work goes on to do that kind of stuff, to pull it together. And we need to thank people for that. You know, our Bible class teachers, like I said, you know, Ruger's down there learning. All the other kids are down there learning. They're doing good things down there. You know, do we ever take the time to just say, hey, thank you for doing what you do?
Yeah.
You know? And you never know. You might, you know, walk up to somebody, thank you for what you're doing. You know, they were down and out, and you just lifted them up. You know, you helped change their attitude, maybe.
The same way like military firefighter, you know, they're not really looking for praise, they just look, you just say, thank you for what you do. That goes, believe it or not, will go further than you can ever imagine for that person.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that one simple little phrase. Don't take no effort. Doesn't take anything, you don't lose anything out of it. Well, it might get you a gain a lot, you gain respect from that person. You can let everybody's happy.
Mhm.
It's simple, so simple that we can do it without any effort at all.
Yeah. And those people know you're thinking about them, you know. All right, let's see here. We have submissiveness is our next. We are to submit to one another. Ephesians 5 and verse 21. Submitting to one another in the fear of God. Submit. When we think of submit, we think of maybe like a slave submits to their master or something like that. Really what we're talking about, we're not talking about ordering people around. You know, we need to have a like mind. We need to work together and not rule over people and try to make them feel down and out. But we also need to, we have to submit to our leadership. You know, they're there for a reason. In Hebrews 13 and verse 17, obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for you. They watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. So we're to be submissive to those who rule over us. And we're not to make it hard on them. You know, we could fight back, and what I'm trying to say here, but we need to do it that way they enjoy being over us, and if they're doing it the right way, they're not going to make it to where we don't want them to rule over us. Ms. Brown?
That's also included in the idea of putting others before us. That is a form of submission.
Yeah.
And it's a way of showing your love for others, is that you're respecting their needs and desires as well over
Yeah.
yours.
That's right. All right. Moving on. Wow. Time goes a lot faster up here than it does when you're sitting out there.
Man,
And there is a glare on that clock. I have better eyes than you. I can kind of see it. All right. I think I'm gonna.
Hey, the one thing too about that submitting is that the leader needs to know too, he's in submission.
That's right.
You know, if both understand that they're fighting for the same reason, for the same cause, or doing something for that reason or cause, that's, you know, anybody get the boss you around,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't like that, because it's not a good taste in your mouth, but you see a guy busy working, he says, come here and help me.
That's right.
You got a different attitude about it.
Yeah. We had a thing in the military. They were called toxic leaders. And that's exactly what they were. They'd be somebody that, they'd be bossing you around, telling you to do this, they'd be doing the opposite. They would, you can't do this and do that. You need to be over here doing this, and they'd be somewhere not doing something. A good leader is somebody that's going to be there with you, fighting the fight with you. We need to have peaceableness. Peace among brethren is something that we should purpose. Romans 14, verse 9. Therefore let us pursue the things which make for peace, and the things by which one may edify another. We need to live in peace with one another. We don't need to be arguing, fighting, quarreling among ourselves. We need to do the best that we can to be peaceable with one another. And then I guess it wouldn't be a lesson about attitudes if I didn't use at least one of the Beatitudes. Matthew 5 and verse 9 is, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." And then next we have hospitality. Christians are to be hospitable. Romans 12 and verse 13. I'm going to read it from here. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. What's hospitality?
Your home is open.
Okay. So inviting people over, not being a stick in the mud and staying at home by yourself all the time.
But that's, I think it is to be sociable. That's a big part of it. There's probably more to meet someone's actual needs as well. They need a place to stay, or need food, or, need help.
Okay.
Have your home open for those services for that purpose.
Okay.
But it is a social element to it.
Well, you have to be sociable to have. I guess you don't have to be.
You have to be talkative.
Yeah, that's not me. Well, and like Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2, it says, "Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some have unwittingly entertained angels." It's like you said, we have to be willing to help people that we don't know. If we don't know them, You have a comment?
A lot of times, we do stuff in our house, stuff about people. And, we got a little few acres of land and stuff. And I like sharing, they would have time out, it's not doing me no good to have their, have yard fixed up or whatever, or cleaned out or whatever. You have people over, see it, have enjoy it with, the lake there, people come fishing, stuff like that, and I have it so I can, others can also enjoy it with, so I gain something from their enjoyment, and, it makes it worth having than if I just kept it myself or whatever, what I mean?
Yeah,
Share.
that's right. All right, I gotta skip some stuff here. We're gonna get to the end of this thing. All right, so we've got attitude towards God, attitude towards ourselves, attitude towards others. I'm going to touch on an attitude towards work. We should be thankful for the ability that we have to work. 1 Corinthians 15 and verses 9 and 10. "For I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, but I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace towards me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not mine. But the grace of God that is with me." So Paul here being thankful for the privilege that it was for him to serve God in the capacity that he did. Do we appreciate the honor that we have to serve? Are we actually serving the way we need to serve? And that's something we need to check. Enthusiasm in our giving. 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 7 says, so let each one give as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. Is our attitude when we're giving, when the Lord's Supper is complete and we pass the plate around, are we giving with the right attitude? Are we just giving what's left over at the end of the week? Are we actually giving, the best that we have? That's something we need to think about. I'll go ahead and skip down to a little bit. It says, ideal attitudes make for ideal working conditions among the members of a local church. Attitude improvements can be compared to the woodcutter sharpening his axe. If you turn to I'll just read Ecclesiastes. I gotta find it on here. Where did it go? Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 10. If the axe is dull and does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. So our attitude is something that we need to sharpen. It's something that if we're not careful, it can slip and we not notice it. It's one of those things that we don't notice our attitude when it changes, but others can notice our attitude when it changes. So we just need to remember to keep our attitudes in check and make sure that we sharpen them. And we can sharpen them by reading His Word, the best we can.